Welcome to Carriers of the Legend podcast. This is episode number 3, and today we're going to be talking about the best video game ever created, hands down, A Link to the Past. So, Anthony, I'm excited. I was so looking forward to this because this is my favorite game of all time. I just have so many fond things and memories about this game. How about you?
I'm excited to hear your memories and things of the sort and why this is your favorite game of all time. It's definitely not my favorite game of all time.
What's your problem?
I'm excited for this. I'm excited to figure out what's going on in your head.
I hate this game.
I don't hate this game, but it's definitely... I've heard a lot of people say, like, this is the Zelda.
Mm-hmm.
And I see where they're coming from, but I can't call it the best Zelda, and I definitely can't call it the best video game.
So then, why don't we just kick things off with our typical questions?
All right, sounds good to me.
All right, let's get into it.
So, Dave, what did your life look like when you first played this game?
It was obviously smaller. I was in the same place that I actually experienced Ocarina of Time from.
Okay.
And Wind Waker and other games. So it's crazy to think back now, like, man, I lived at that house for a really long time. But yeah, I was younger, and when I first started playing the game, it didn't really quite grasp me as much as it did as I got older, and I was like, oh yeah, that game. To be completely honest, I don't really remember when I first started playing the game, but I do remember different parts of my life as I experienced the game again and again. It's much like every other Zelda game that I've played, where I played the beginning time and time again because, you know, back then maybe something happened to your save file and it wasn't like today where it's, you know, accessible from anywhere.
Yeah.
But how about you? What did it look like when you first played the game? I haven't played the game.
No. Yeah, my first time playing, it was strange. So I didn't know much about video games when I was younger, like 5, 6, and my life was not like the average kid's. I didn't go to a daycare or anything, but my parents were both busy. So my dad worked night shift, and so he slept all day, and so I kind of had the house to myself.
Yeah, my dad did too.
Oh, that's weird. That's crazy. Yeah. So my dad had a computer, and we had a computer room, and he had an emulator on it, which I don't know how, you know, normal that is, but we had a list of Super Nintendo games, and I didn't even, as a kid, know that a Super Nintendo, what that was. I just knew I had these video games on the computer, so I would click on Zelda 3. That's what it read.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would, it was at the bottom of the list, so I would just scroll down to the bottom and click it because it was started with a Z, and that was my second experience with Zelda, because I first played it on the Game Boy, which was Link's Awakening, and then I played it on the computer, and that was just like the cooler looking Zelda to me. I didn't really know what the difference was between the two, but I just knew that whenever I wanted to play cool looking Zelda, I would play it on the PC, and whenever I wanted to play it on the go, I would play Link's Awakening.
So you thought that A Link to the Past looked better?
I did, and I honestly thought they were the same game. It wasn't until I got older that I actually played A Link to the Past and knew what I was doing enough to actually enjoy it. And by that point, I had it on my Game Boy Advanced.
So you mentioned you thought it was the cooler looking Zelda. What made you think that way?
Well, obviously, like, the graphics, they're 16-bit, and the Game Boy is 8-bit with no color.
Yeah.
But I really, even to this day, I still look at A Link to the Past, and it's kind of timeless. You don't look at that game, like, you can look at Ocarina of Time and say, wow, that's aged pretty poorly. Everything looks like paper mache. But when you look at A Link to the Past, it still holds up. It's a good looking game, I think.
That was good thinking.
Good thinking.
Yeah. It is a good looking game.
What do you think of the music in A Link to the Past? The sound?
Yeah, I've got that one tune going through my head now, which is For the Woods. As you asked that question, it's so memorable, but really, like, maybe I should hold this response, but really,
Okay.
like my favorite part, I don't really know why. It's the opening scene where the Triforce is spinning. That's where it goes into the main title screen.
Yeah.
And now I can hear the beginning when it starts telling the story. That's, I think, at least musically, even though it's digitized and MIDI files, that's so much cooler than, a lot of the music that was out in video games at the time.
So what did you most like about A Link to the Past?
I've got to be honest, the part that I like the most is the first boss.
Really?
I don't know why, but it's like all of those rhinos or whatever they are with the shields that are going around in a circle. You got to hit them with the bow. I just felt like out of every Zelda boss I've ever come up against, that is the easiest boss.
It is easy. So you like it because it's easy.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. But something else that I really liked in that game, there's so much good to talk about. But I really liked, going around Kakariko Village.
Yeah.
When I used to call it Kakario when I was a little kid because I didn't know how to pronounce it. But I really liked Kakariko Village and trying to catch up with that dude that would always run away from you. And I also liked the transition from Light World to Dark World. But I'll have to be honest, I liked the Light World a lot more just because I was a kid. Dark World was a little bit more mysterious. I really loved the artistic style in that game and the overall package.
Yeah.
Music was good, graphics were good, gameplay was probably, out of all of them, gameplay is probably my favorite. How about you?
I really like the sense of epicness that this game portrays. Like you were saying in the beginning, how it starts with the Triforce coming onto the screen, and it's like bam in your face. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. You know that this is going to be something different than the two games that were before it, and it starts with a story. I think it's the first game to start with like a cutscene story type thing. I just like the music. It's so awesome. You're walking through the field. That's the track that should be playing when you're walking through the field. But the way the game starts out, like you're saying, it's like Zelda telepathically speaks to you like, you need to save me. And from the moment you sit down, you hear the rain in the background.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, it's just like, and then you storm the castle, and the pacing of the game, it never like slows down. You just go from one place to the next, to the next, to the next. There's no like in between stuff.
No, there's not.
Like there's Zelda games where you have to go fetch this thing and go talk to this person and go save this thing before you can even get to the dungeon. Not this game.
Yeah.
You're just there.
It's like a powerhouse.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. You never stop being awesome.
It's like, why go to the gym when you can just play Zelda? So those were some of the things that we really liked about the game. What was your least favorite part of that game? Can be when you were a kid or when you think back now or play the game now.
This might sound silly because I just talked about like how there's not a whole bunch of dilly-dallying around in the game. But I think my least favorite thing about the game is that there's not enough dilly-dallying around to do. I know it sounds silly. But I don't know, like I think other Zeldas do this well. Majora's Mask does this perfectly. There's all that side content, all those side quests to do. And granted, there's only 4 dungeons in that game, so they have tons of space to work with. But like A Link to the Past, when I pick up the game, I'm just where I left off. So like, I'm in the middle of a dungeon.
Oh yeah.
Or I'm on my way to another dungeon.
Yeah.
And that's about it. And I'm like, like I just want to relax and play A Link to the Past, but I like have to be fully there every time I pick up the game. And yeah, that to me just makes it a little less approachable. Like I can't just pick this game up and play it.
Yeah, because if you take too long, it's like my wife will often say like, "Why don't you play Zelda?" And it's like, because I don't have 5 or 6 hours just to sit here today to figure out where I was, and then another 5 or 6 hours to figure out where I want to go next. But there isn't a whole lot of exploration. You're right, unless you're going for heart pieces. There's still not a whole lot to do. You chop down some bushes,
Yeah.
and after about 5,000 bushes, you're like, okay, that's enough.
Yeah. So, what is your least favorite part of A Link to the Past?
When I was a kid, I always hated when things got dark. Like, I've played the beginning part of the castle so many times that you kind of know what to expect. But I hate when, like, you've got to light up a room because, like, you only have that little... I don't even know what shape that is. Let's just call it a teardrop.
Yeah, that's...
without a point. And that's all you can see. I hated that part. And I don't know if there's anything more that I was like, oh, I can't do this.
Right.
It's just that one part that I'm like, stop making everything dark.
When you said everything goes dark, I thought you meant like the light world shift to the dark world and it's like all dark. But you meant like literally dark.
Yeah.
And that is frustrating, like not being able to see. But for someone that loves the game so much, it's cool that the thing that you least like about it is something so little. You know what I mean? It makes sense.
Yeah, when I was younger, I used to hate the Zora. It's so weird how the Zora changed, isn't it? Like, the Zora changed from, like, these enemies that would shoot fireballs at you to now they're, like, your friends and they want to hang out and go eat, at a restaurant. It's so weird, but I used to hate the Zora, too, before I had flippers. That was also a little bit frustrating where, like, you couldn't progress until you had something else. Like, I remember being trapped where you couldn't go past Kakariko Village because you didn't have... the gloves, the power gloves. So you couldn't move the stone out of the way to get up there.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah. Like you said, the Zora flippers, you can't go in the water till you get the flippers, so that cuts a whole part of the world off. And a lot of people like that. I think I like stuff like that, where like things are blocked off. You're like, I know I need to get to the water eventually. When do I get to do that?
Yeah.
And then you get the flippers, you're like, it's time, I can explore that now.
Yeah.
But that is, it can be frustrating. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. It looks like the water is my only option, and I keep dying from jumping in it.
Yeah. You have to remember the days, this came out the days before you could talk to anybody. Before you had
language.
the internet. Well, before the internet. Because your friends weren't playing Zelda, let's be honest. Your friends were playing that stupid little Italian guy. Being Italian, you're Italian, we can say that. But they were playing that guy. They weren't playing The Legend of Zelda. They were playing Contra. They were playing other things. And you're the only kid going, anybody else play Zelda? No, you nerd.
So, Dave, what is your favorite memory with A Link to the Past?
Yeah, I remember I was... sitting on the top bunk at a place that wasn't the same where I grew up. But that was actually the time that I first beat the game. Like I said, I've played many Zelda games, the beginning of them, so many times. Yeah. But I never beat them. So I can remember playing through this game. It was like after the year 2000, so I had the internet. I was able to access it. I was able to figure out where I needed to go, so that was helpful because, like, when you're like 14 or 15 at that point, and you've already played through the game about 32 times, you kind of have enough at some point. And I can remember sitting on that top bunk playing on that Super Nintendo until the game was finished. And I remember when I beat the game, the sense of accomplishment that came over me, because that was the first Zelda game that I had ever beaten.
Wow.
I still couldn't really tell you why it's my favorite. I think it's just the game as a whole. And I think a lot of it has to do with where we were when we were kids, what impacted us the most, why it's our favorite. So how about you? What's your most fond memory of this game?
I think one of the reasons I don't like A Link to the Past the same way everyone does, like I don't have it as like a holy grail of my Zeldas, is because I don't have one of those memories for this game. I can go back to any other Zelda game and be like, oh, my favorite time playing this one was this. But A Link to the Past is just like, it was always like an accomplishment type of thing. Like, I need to beat this game because I played it first as a little kid, and I need to beat it because it's a Zelda game. But like, I can't think of any like emotional time or anything besides the time that I first beat it. And I was like, oh, I've beaten the game. It's done. Now I don't have to worry about this one anymore. That sounds terrible.
No, that's probably what would have happened to me if I ever played Oracle of Ages and Seasons, which I did start to play a little bit. I'd probably be like, let me just get through this.
Yeah.
So I can be done with it and mark it off my list.
Now, I will say the one really cool thing about beating this game is it shows all the resolutions. Do you remember that? Like, whenever it's like the end and it goes through Hyrule and it shows like the prosperity of Hyrule. It shows like the flute boy.
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
Flute boy plays again. And,
yeah, because he disappeared.
And everything being restored to the way it was. The sick boy recovered. Your uncle, he's okay. He's not dead like he was in the beginning of the game. And I think that's all reflecting Link's wish whenever he wishes on the Triforce at the end of the game. So I think my favorite part is beating it, but not for like an emotional reason, just because it was satisfying. You know what I noticed? We've like gotten to the end of this video. Or we still have one question left, but we haven't even talked about like the Dark World, which is like a huge. It's more than half of this game. You know, like the Light World, there's only 3 dungeons there. There's like 8 in the Dark World, and we just kind of like like we like the Light World, but like what are your thoughts on like the Dark World and stuff like that? I feel like that's an important question.
Yeah. I've never really been a big fan of the Dark World. Maybe it was because I was raised in a Christian household, and the Dark World is so associated with evil and everything wrong that that was my thinking. That was what kind of drove me to not like it, because you got like you have Agnum. I don't really know how to say his name.
I've never Agahinum. Something like that.
But then he takes Zelda into the Dark World, and you're like, okay, this is getting a little bit freaky. And that's the way that I was raised. That's what I still believe, is that you don't mess with things that are evil. You don't mess with things that are potentially in that same structure. So I think that's why I don't really have a whole lot of fond memories about the Dark World, because I was like, all right, let's just get through this part of the game. How about you? Because I know you didn't mention it either.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's one of people's favorite things about this game is the Dark World theme. They're like, that is one of the most epic pieces of video game music ever.
Oh, yeah, the music. Yeah.
The music is sick.
Yeah, it's my ringtone.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my perspective of the Dark World, though, and like how you said it, because I'm also Christian, and I was raised in a Christian household, and I liked not the fact that it was dark, but I liked that, the enemy has taken you to that step. You know what I mean? It's taken you to that place, and it is now your turn as the hero to walk in that dark world and to drive out the darkness. You're the light, and that's also very reflective of Christianity, I think, because the darkness cannot drive out the light. You're just this one person there with the moon's pearl, and you're the only. That's the only reason you can't turn into a.
Yeah, that's true.
You stay a human, and so this one little drip of light cannot be driven out by the darkness, and you end up succeeding and driving it all away and eventually getting the Triforce in the end. And I think that's super powerful and reflective of our world today. But you did pose a very interesting point of like being a Christian, where do you like draw the line of like, hey, this is very dark, I'm putting myself in this position of enjoying this darkness in something. And I think it's deciding, what do I like about the fact that I'm in the dark world? Do I like the scary monsters and the creepiness, or do I like the symbolism and things of the sort?
I think as I've gotten older, as I've matured, there have been things that I've changed my view on when it comes to those things. Like I said, I still stand by that I'm not going to mess with anything evil or in that realm. But at the same time, playing Zelda, it's kind of what you put into it. At least for me, it's like, okay, well, now I understand the Dark World. I get it. I can move past it, and it's not like freaking me out anymore. But I'm telling you, that piece of music from when I went down to Nashville and I saw the 25th anniversary symphony orchestra, oh my goodness, it's my ringtone. It's my favorite part, because it's just such an epic piece of music. So probably that should have been my favorite thing about the entire game, since it's now my ringtone 20 years later. So we do have the final question, which I think is what the game means to you, right?
Yeah, what's
today?
The game mean to you today?
So what does the game mean to you today?
Man, good question. Right before doing this video, I got on my Switch, which is where I have it on the virtual console, And I was like, all right, let's play the game a bit, just to refresh my memory and to like see what I like about this game, what I don't like. And I was trying to consider, what's this game mean to me as I'm playing it? And I don't have a nostalgic feeling of like, oh, this is the game I grew up playing. It's not even anything. It's just I would make Link get ready to do his spin attack, and I would see the blue sparkles move up his sword.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that looks really cool, because like that reminded me, that took me back out of all the random things. It was the little sparkle sprite on his sword. Because I was like, as a kid, I had that, and I had Link's Awakening, and Link's Awakening, his sword would just blink a lot.
Yeah.
But it would remind me like, this is the cool Zelda. You know what I mean? This is the one with the good graphics, the good music. And it made me kind of think like, man, I like that about this game. I like its aesthetic.
Yeah.
I like its...
You're not alone in that sword thing.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
That little thing
No,
would make you...
yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that's just, it takes me back too.
Mm.
What the game means to me is everything Zelda.
Mm.
I feel like that Zelda game should have been the first.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to stop watching. I get it after a comment like that. But Zelda 2 was terrible. The artistic direction, the idea shouldn't have ever happened. But, and Zelda 1 was so stupidly difficult. It's funny how much of a difference there was from Zelda 1 to now A Link to the Past.
Mm-hmm.
So much so that, like, in my brain, that's the first Zelda game. Just because the nostalgia is there, and I feel like that set the stage for every other Zelda game. Because basically, Ocarina of Time is just A Link to the Past recreated.
It is. There's so much about Ocarina of Time, and literally, like, the first 3 warm-up dungeons, and then you got the grown-up portion, which is kind of like the Dark World. Half the music from The Legend of Zelda, even Zelda's theme, was introduced in A Link to the Past. You know what I mean?
That's why it's the best Zelda game.
It created the Zelda formula that we know and love today.
Except for BOTW has really kind of changed. I'm sure it's changed a lot of our ideas of what Zelda should be. Mm-hmm. And I would much rather, moving forward from here on, I would much rather play Breath of the Wild sort of simulation than A Link to the Past, where like you can't move on in the game until you can't go here until. Mm-hmm. If they recreated A Link to the Past, it doesn't matter if it had new graphics or it was old graphics, but in a way of exploration like that, I think you'd have a completely different game. Yeah, you might hate it though.
A Link Between Worlds is kind of that. You can go any dungeon you want to at any point.
I guess that is true. It's just been many years since the game released. I haven't played it again. Mm-hmm. Again, small screen.
Yeah, small 3DS screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that should be... I think all the Zelda should be re-released for the 35th anniversary, but what are you going to do?
Yeah, that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us. Anthony, can you tell us what we're going to be talking about next time?
Next time, I think I would really like to talk about The Wind Waker. What are your thoughts?
Oh, my gosh. That's another one that's nostalgic for me. Mm-hmm. Every single time we get together, this guy's playing like the theme, probably Outset Island, I think, is the theme that's playing. Mm-hmm. And it takes me so far back that I keep saying, like, hey, can I borrow your Wii U just so I can play Wind Waker? If they were going to release anything on the Switch, seeing that it's March of 2021, that's the game they should have been re-releasing.
Right.
But
totally.
They decided to release another one. So thank you for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed. We hope that you give us our comments, that you smash the like button, that you subscribe, and you tell us what kind of content you're looking for. Because again, we're just talking about Zelda with 2 friends that have grown very close over this game.
I'm Anthony.
And I'm Dave. And together we are Carriers of the Legend.